Have you ever encountered true evil? How? My kids went to visit their mom in the UK on a court-ordered visit. I knew what was going to happen, but couldn't prevent the visit. Sure enough, rather than put them on a plane back to me in the USA, she went on the run with them and her boyfriend. I got a lot of help from the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the US State Department, and the Scottish government paid all my legal fees over there. During the 5 months she had the kids, she tried to brainwash them. She told them if they came back to me, I would allow them to be molested and kill them. This was relentless. My son was incredibly strong and refused to believe her or cooperate. They were 13 at the time, but my daughter was much easier to manipulate. I really don't know for certain that they weren't physically abused, but a lot of the stuff she accused me of was things she and her then boyfriend, now husband, did to the children. I had to fly to Scotland to appear in a trial. I walked out of the courthouse at 9 PM on a Friday night with the children. Normal process for these cases is to have a designated handover 2 or 3 days later, but the child psychologist who interviewed us all was positive that my ex-wife would kill the children, and the judge agreed. I got them back in the clothes they stood in. I have no doubt she would indeed have killed them rather than hand them over to me. 5 years later, she has no contact with the children. Their choice. They have anxiety and depression, but are doing remarkably well. They are high school seniors now, and they make me proud every day. I'm so glad you were able to get your kids back and keep them safe. I worked with a guy in Ontario who was always posting on Facebook that he just adopted new puppy like every 4 or 5 months. He adopted them from all different shelters and people. Had to have about 8 or 9 at one point. We went to his house for some reason and there were no dogs. No signs of dogs. No toys. No food bowls, etc. We asked about the puppies and he just offhandedly pointed to the backyard, which we noticed was full of little mounds, and said they all were sick and died. Guess he just didn't have good luck with animals. The way he said it was cold. The CSPCA investigated him and tested the remains. He was putting small amounts of his own homemade poison in the dog food and conducting his own little LD50 test. My mother unexpectedly picked me up early from school one day and had brought my cat with her. Me. Why is my cat in the car? Her. To comfort you. Me. Why do I need her to comfort me? Her. Because your dad died. That's why I'm here to get you. I sobbed the whole drive home, holding my cat. When we pulled into the driveway she told me it was a joke and to stop being dramatic. My dad wasn't dead. She just made it up and brought my cat to add to the effect. She thought it was hilarious. Maybe not pure evil, but psychotic. She never stopped playing jokes on me. I'm in my 30s now. We're estranged. That would scar 90% of people for life. What the actual frick? Back in 2011 my uncle down in Mexico had got kidnapped by one of the cartels. They gave my entire family on my dad's side a random $10,000 and we would get him back. My dad called in people who owed him money and managed to get the 10 grand. He sent it down to the family down south and they paid the ransom for my uncle. All we got in return was my uncle's lifeless body. There was a kid in my 6th grade class who loved designing his own custom shanks and then stabbing people in the arm or back with them. He had a look of pure joy on his face when he saw that he drew blood and caused suffering to another human. He was only suspended for a week the first 2 times he did this before they finally kicked him out of school after the 3rd time. I've told this story before, about meeting a murderer. Was a journalist on weekend duty. Got called out to a story. Guy claims his car was hijacked with his 2-year-old son in it. I met him at the police station. He seemed devastated. I was devastated. I mean, I'd done plenty of grisly crime stories, but a missing kid is next level awful. Next day I had my day off. The regular crime reporter called me. They'd arrested the dad and found the little boy's body at a rubbish dump. He did it out of revenge for his wife cheating. It still bothers me to this day how I could have felt so much sympathy for this man. I shook his hand. I cried with him. I'm usually very good at picking up when someone is off. Just goes to show you, true evil disguises itself very well. That's crazy. Poor boy. I hate when parents take out their anger at the other with their child. About 10 years ago I was walking in the city when I saw a motorcade of police stop in front of the courthouse. A tall, classy guy in handcuffs comes out, escorted by police, gives me a wink and a smile, confident. I thought it was just some other finance mogul who took it too far. Saw him in the news a week later. Guy stabbed and killed his 2 young children in a bathtub to get back at his cheating ex. I felt like my aunt was pretty evil, and she was a kindergarten teacher no less. She pulled my arm out of its socket one time when I was 4 and she was helping me cross the road. I visited her when I was 16 and every opportunity she got she would whisper in my ear, "You are worthless. You are nothing," and just keep walking. The visit ended with her trying to strangle me after I took issue with her trying to force feed my brother Ginger, and that was the last time my family spoke to her. I remember fantasizing about getting back at her in some way for a while, but then moved on with my life and grew up. Years later, she was being her typical self with my uncle, her brother, and berating him, calling him worthless, and he shot her in the head, killing her. It was a real tragedy for the family as he shot himself afterwards as well, but I certainly have not missed my aunt. I don't know about true evil, but my stepfather-in-law is a truly horrible person. My husband was diagnosed as autistic quite young. Stepfather said it was BS and just beat the crap out of him. Just beatings would have been one thing, but he got downright petty. He would purposely figure out the foods he had sensory issues with and cook only those foods. That turned into their entire menu. He claimed that they were his favorite foods, but this favoritism only occurred after he realized my husband didn't like them. He also would go out of his way to make sure my husband didn't get things he wanted, even if it meant eating more cake so my husband had less. When my husband's teachers suggested special education, he refused and just beat him more to try to get him to have good grades. All bruises were easily explained because my husband liked skateboarding. He was determined that autism was just bulls and that it was nothing a good whooping couldn't fix. The final blow, the truly crappy thing, was the birth of his son. When my husband was in his late teens, his mother and stepfather had a baby. The baby was diagnosed as autistic. He is one of those Austin parents now and fully advocates for autism awareness. He still refuses to acknowledge his stepson's autism and just ignores it. Talk about two-faced. Yeah, when I was 16-17, I would go to someone's house to hang out, and they live relatively close to our high school's park. Sometimes there would be this guy at the park. He was a nice guy, a little too nice to me personally, but nonetheless, a nice guy. He would come up to me and we would talk, and he would ask if I wanted to hang out with him and his friends. I would tell him no, my mom is expecting me home because stranger danger. Turns out my stranger danger vibe was correct because I found out he raped 2 underage girls. Yeah, dodge a bullet. I used to work with a woman years ago who was estranged from her husband. The day before her husband was going to take their daughter to Disney World, she smothered her daughter with a pillow and then tried, unsuccessfully, to kill herself. I told this story on Reddit yesterday, so I'll keep this shorter. I had a friend that would threaten to kill herself every night and tell me it was my fault if she did it and everyone would know because I didn't love her as more than friends. It ruined me. And then she started dating my best friend and their relationship was volatile and abusive. Everything she said was lies. I believe she was truly a psychopath. Dang bro, that's rough. Had an ex who would threaten to do the same. People like that are just poison. I am an EMS provider and was called once for a stabbing victim. Female in her 30s. The boyfriend kicked her front door off the hinges and stabbed her 30+ times inside her apartment. I rode the victim in and watched the trauma team work her in the air. Not long after she was pronounced, we received dispatch to police holding because the boyfriend had cut his wrist up, chicken scratches, and he needed assessed. We had to go over and I had to assess his vitals and put some gauze on his wrist. I've met some scary people in the field, but this guy was next level. Lifeless eyes. There wasn't an ounce of remorse in his demeanor. I couldn't have her, so nobody will have her was his attitude. Had I not been surrounded by police officers, I would have been concerned for my own safety. My grandmother started dating this guy a few years after her husband died, and I never liked him. He unsettled me, and most of my family. We all just had a terrible feeling about him. He hated children. Funny cause my sister and I were incredibly important to my grandmother. He was controlling. He tried to isolate her from the family. I don't know much more of the specifics than that cause I was 7-9 when this happened. But eventually, she left him and he started stalking her, taking pictures and following her. She was planning on moving to live with my aunt and her family so that she could be more easily taken care of when the time came. She had sold her house. It was in escrow and everything. All she had to do was actually physically move. And this monster snuck into her house while she was letting her dog out and shot her. There are only two good things about this, in my opinion. 1. My grandmother didn't even know what happened. She didn't feel anything. She had no idea. And 2. The sucker tried to kill himself and laid in agony for hours while he was dying. He did die eventually, like 8 hours later if I remember right. It was terrible for my family though. It ruined all our lives for a while. My mom still doesn't know how to cope with it even 17 years later. And 2. The sucker tried to kill himself and laid in agony for hours while he was dying. That is karma at its finest. My aunt and uncle were deep Christians and odd when I was growing up. They have 5 kids, but homeschooled because school is evil. They had no TV, because that would be evil. I was bored when at their house and saw both of them as kind of weird. About 2 decades ago we found that he had been sexually abusing their 8-year-old daughter. When confronted he admitted to it, along with using thousands of dollars to buy things for the other women he was with. His daughter lived with me and my wife for a few years when she was about 18. She was angry at herself for breaking up her family and had blocked all her memories of him abusing her. She never had counseling, because they didn't have money for it, and thought it was all a lie. She asked, and we found the original medical and police reports for her. I did not enjoy going over them with her. I hope to never see him again. I've spent a lot of time volunteering in a prison. As a teacher, every one of my students are good people who made bad decisions and are paying their debt. I've never thought of them as evil, except for one student, very intelligent man, serving time for killing his wife in a particularly heinous way. In casual conversation, he refers to her as his ex, like, my ex and I went to Greece once. I was shocked the first time I heard him do it. She's not your ex-wife, man. She didn't divorce you. You chopped her to pieces. Closest thing to casual evil I've ever seen. You have been visited by the ingenious Joe. Comment brain so you always see the glass half full. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.